Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're laying the absolute groundwork on the engineering and construction services industry. And we're going to figure out exactly how we measure its massive global impact. I mean, think about it. When you look up at a city skyline or when you're driving across a huge suspension bridge, you're experiencing the direct physical output of this exact industry. But how do investors actually measure the hidden risks or even the opportunities behind these massive projects? Well, today, we're using the rigorous SASB, the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board framework, as our blueprint to find out.
Okay, let's quickly run through our blueprint for this explainer. We're going to hit 4 main areas today. First, the 4 major segments. Second, environmental and safety risks. Third, life cycle and climate impacts. And finally, number 4, business ethics and integrity. Let's get building.
All right, Section 1, the 4 major segments. You really can't assess risk if you don't know who the key players are, right? So we're going to break down exactly who is doing the actual building. So this entire global industry essentially operates through 4 distinct pillars. First up, we have infrastructure construction. These are the folks building out the massive physical arteries of our society. Second, we have non-residential building construction. They're creating the actual spaces where commerce and industry happen. Third, you've got engineering services. Think of them as the brains of the operation. They're doing the highly specialized architectural designs and feasibility studies way before a single shovel even hits the dirt. And fourth, we have the building subcontractors and professional services. These are those essential, often smaller entities that come in to do the highly specialized work. The electrical, the plumbing, carpentry, landscaping, the whole shebang. Now, a massive global firm might actually operate across a few of these, but breaking them down into these 4 specific buckets is absolutely crucial for understanding the unique risks each one faces. Now, there is a really massive distinction in this industry when you compare the immense civic scale of infrastructure against the highly functional commercial spaces of non-residential building. It's a completely different ballgame. On one side, infrastructure builders are tackling these monumental, super capital-intensive public works. We're talking power plants, giant dams, highways, massive water networks. But on the other side, non-residential builders are putting up things like factories, data centers, hospitals, and universities. The environmental footprints, the types of clients they deal with, and especially the regulatory hurdles, they all look very, very different, depending on which side of this divide a company actually operates on. Before we go any further and start analyzing the impacts of these segments, we really need to get a handle on the industry's language for tracking their work pipeline. You're going to hear these terms a lot. First, active projects. Pretty straightforward. Those are the ones currently under development, right in the thick of the design and construction phases. Then you have commission projects, which are fully completed and ready for service. And finally, backlog. Now, this one is a crucial financial metric. It basically represents the value of projects that are contractually expected in the future, but they haven't been completed or recognized as actual revenue yet. Definitely keep this concept of a backlog in mind because it's going to become a major indicator of climate risk later on in the explainer. Moving on to Section 2, environmental and safety risks. Now that we have our taxonomy sorted, let's look at the environmental and structural risks that just naturally happen when you move from a paper blueprint to a physical reality. Construction is messy, and it comes with some pretty severe local impacts. So, to measure all these messy impacts, the SASB framework requires companies to disclose highly specific metrics. We're not talking about vague PR promises about going green here. We're talking about tracking the exact number of incidents where a company might have violated air quality, waste, or water discharge permits. The framework demands real accountability for structural integrity and workforce health. By tracking these hard numbers, we get the real story of how a company actually behaves on a muddy construction site. And the crucial point here is that poor design doesn't just cause annoying delays, it triggers immense rework costs and completely damages a firm's reputation for structural integrity. Think about it. If an engineering or construction firm makes an error in the design phase or just executes poorly on site, they might literally have to tear out all that work and do it completely over again. The SASB framework requires companies to explicitly disclose the financial hit of defect and safety-related rework costs, excluding changes driven by the client, of course. Plus, they have to disclose any monetary losses from legal proceedings tied to these defects. In this business, a structural failure isn't just a minor whoops, it is a massive financial and legal nightmare.
But beyond the structure itself, we really have to talk about the human element. The harsh reality is that fatality and injury rates in the engineering and construction services industry are exceptionally high compared to other sectors. I mean, construction obviously requires a ton of intense manual labor. Workers are out there exposed to heavy machinery, they're working at incredibly dangerous heights, and they're handling hazardous materials every single day. Failing to protect worker health doesn't just result in tragic human loss, which is awful enough, but from a business standpoint, it also leads to regulatory fines, huge contingent liabilities, and project downtime that just absolutely destroys profitability.
To actually maintain a strong safety culture and dodge those liabilities, companies have to track specific incident rates comprehensively, and that means across both their direct payroll and their contract workers. You can't just report on the full-time executives and engineers sitting in an office. You have to track the TIIR, that's the total recordable incident rate, and the fatality rate for the temporary contractors and subcontractors. Because let's face it, they're often the ones doing the most dangerous physical labor. True transparency here really separates the companies with an authentic safety culture from the ones who are just trying to avoid bad PR.
All right, Section 3, Life Cycle and Climate Impacts. What actually happens after the construction crew packs up and goes home? Let's see how all this builds into the long-term, everyday footprint of these projects once they are commissioned and in actual use.
Buildings and infrastructure are literally some of the largest resource consumers on planet Earth. Just think about the sheer amount of energy required to heat a massive skyscraper, or the millions of gallons of water needed to cool a hyperscale data center. Making energy and water efficiency a priority during the very earliest planning phases is absolutely essential now. Companies are actually tracking how many of their active and commissioned projects are going after third-party sustainability certifications, things like LEED or BREEAM. Firms that can offer these sustainability-oriented design and construction services are gaining a massive competitive edge. They are capturing serious revenue from clients who are desperate to lower their own long-term operational costs and carbon footprints.
And this strategic divide is completely reshaping the industry. Remember that term backlog we defined earlier? Well, as climate regulations evolve globally, investors want to know exactly what is sitting in a company's pipeline. They want to know how much of their expected future revenue is tied to hydrocarbon projects, like oil refineries, gas pipelines, and coal plants, versus renewable energy projects like solar, wind, and geothermal. Guys, this isn't just about environmentalism anymore. It is about pure, hard financial risk.
And this specific metric shows you exactly why that backlog divide matters so deeply. The SASB standards require companies to disclose the amount of backlog cancellations specifically associated with hydrocarbon-related projects. Why? Because projects that are heavily tied to fossil fuels are increasingly facing really intense regulatory scrutiny. They're failing to secure financing, or they're facing massive local pushback. When those projects get canceled or even just deferred indefinitely, it directly wipes out expected revenues straight off the company's books. Tracking these cancellations gives investors a really clear picture of just how much of a company's future value is at risk because of the transition to a low-carbon economy.
Finally, Section 4, Business Ethics and Integrity. Let's step away from the physical job site for a minute and examine the foundational ethics of how these massive, capital-intensive global contracts are actually won in the first place.
20. So what does that number mean? That number represents the 20 lowest-ranked countries on Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index. Look, infrastructure and construction are massive, multi-million or even multi-billion-dollar deals, and they very often involve public funds and government officials. This makes the entire industry highly susceptible to bribery and corruption. So the framework requires companies to explicitly disclose the number of active projects and the value of their backlog located within these 20 highest-risk countries. It forces management to be completely transparent about their geographical exposure to corruption risk, and more importantly, explain how on earth they are mitigating it.
The framework also requires strict disclosure of any monetary losses stemming from anti-competitive practices, and unfortunately, this is a known risk in this sector. For example, take complementary bidding. This is when a company intentionally submits an artificially high or totally unacceptable bid for a contract they have absolutely no intention of winning, just to make a buddy's bid look like a better deal. Or there's bid pooling, where competitors secretly coordinate to just slice up the pie among themselves. This ensures everyone gets a piece, but it completely destroys fair market competition. Disclosing fines related to these practices shows investors exactly which firms are playing by the rules and which ones are risking their reputations and their balance sheets through fraud.
So as we wrap up this explainer, we really have to ask ourselves, how will a sustainable transition reshape the future? From managing intense worksite safety and minimizing defect rework, to shifting revenue backlogs away from fossil fuels and towards renewables, and ensuring absolute integrity in the bidding process, the expectations placed on this industry are just monumental. So the next time you look at a towering skyscraper or drive on a massive new highway, ask yourself, did the company that built this just win a quick contract? Or are they truly laying the groundwork for a sustainable, profitable future? Thanks for joining me to explore the blueprint of the engineering and construction services industry.